So hello guys, we got a new patch update on Mobile Legends, so I'm gonna talk about it today. Okay, so today the things we're gonna cover. First thing is equipment update. There's not a lot of equipment change this patch. Mostly it's just Rose Gold Meteor and a couple of lifesteal items that are changed because of the changes to Rose Gold. So not much update on this. Next thing we are gonna cover is the attack speed fighter heroes, which are the main focus of this patch, because Bunton wants to adjust the fighter attack speed heroes that kinda, are lagging behind the meta all the time. It's been a while since attack speed fighter has been considered meta. Other than maybe Freya, at least in rank. Competitive play, we never ever see any Freyas or Arguses. The only attack speed fighter that actually features in the meta but doesn't build attack speed is actually just Tamus, and maybe Badang if Diablo uses it. But other than that, nobody really plays attack speed fighters in the meta like Zilong. Nobody does that. So the purpose of Bunton taking this patch forward is to buff these fighters. Other than that, we are also covering other minor changes to the heroes like Carry, and finally my thoughts on the meta. To round it all off, what I think the meta will be moving forward from this patch. So what is the equipment update? First thing, Rose Gold Meteor. That's the main change. So basically they want Rose Gold Meteor to be a attack speed fighter item. So they have changed the passive. The passive now does increase your hybrid defense by 1 for every 1% lifesteal you have. So every 1% lifesteal you have, you get 1 physical defense and 1 magic defense. And if you are not a fighter hero, the effect is half. So you have to be a fighter hero to maximize this passive. And the maximum you can go up to is 50. So 50 magic defense and 50 physical defense if you have 50% lifesteal. It already at base gives 10% lifesteal because Rose Gold Meteor already has 10% lifesteal. Before this patch, it doesn't have 10% lifesteal. It has 20, I think like 20 magic defense or something. There's no more magic defense on this item anymore. It's not like a pseudo magic defense item for like when you build on a marksman anymore or something. It's more like if you have lifesteal, then you build it for the extra defense. I don't think it's good for marksman now, because the maximum you can go is 50, right, for fighter heroes, but the maximum you can go is 25 for marksman hero. So it's unlikely that it's actually that good on marksman. It's probably a very weak defense item at best, and it doesn't even give like great stats anyway. Let me introduce the lifesteal items that we have. So the first one is Endless Battle, 8% lifesteal. Next is Wind of Nature, 10% lifesteal. Demon Hunter Sword has adjusted this patch. Basically, before this patch, I think it gets 16% lifesteal. So now they changed it. So now 8% lifesteal at base. You don't have to get any stacks. Basically, you don't have to hit anything before you get 8% lifesteal. It's just at base. You get 2% lifesteal for each attack you land on the enemy. So 8, then 5 stacks of 2%. So 5 times 2 is 10%. So total 18%. Next, Ask Claws. Ask Claws get 20% lifesteal. Before this patch, it was 25%. So they nerfed it by 5% this patch. So this is for the physical items, which most likely Rose Gold Meteor is going to be used by physical attack fighters rather than magic because of its physical attack stat. Most of the magic attack fighters like Sylvana is not gonna use this much because it doesn't really benefit from this extra for the physical attack. But you can still buy it. It's not like it's horrible because you can still use like almost 70% of what it gives. But the 40 physical attack is wasted on magic heroes. Magic items, we have Thallium Scythe, 8% lifesteal. Feather of Heaven, 10% lifesteal. And Concentrated Energy, 20%. So all these items, basically, if you build it in tandem with Rose Gold Meteor, you will get extra defense from Rose Gold Meteor's first unique passive Dragon skill. So if let's say you build Heart's Claws along with Rose Gold Meteor, you have 10% lifesteal from Rose Gold and 20% lifesteal from Heart's Claws. Total, you get 30 hybrid defense from the Dragon skill passive. So now that we know how it works, moving on to the next part of the presentation, we have the heroes with no adjustments. So first, we have Freya. I think Freya is not 100% a user of Rose Gold that much. but I think it could be a possible item for her. Possible, because firstly, Freya only builds Heart's Claws at max. Sometimes she doesn't even build Heart's Claws sometimes, so she might not even be building a lot of lifesteal, so she might not be using Rose Gold Meteor. But nonetheless, Freya is still strong. Whatever it is, Freya still has a high win rate in Mythic Glory Plus, so I don't think the updates in this patch change her that much, so she still remains strong. No nerfs, no buffs, just the same, unless the meta shifts, but I don't see it affecting Freya that much this patch. Second, we have Mincy. Mincita, one of my favorites, of course. I think Mincy is pretty good with the changes to Rose Gold, because I tested it, and actually his skill 2, you know, the poke skill, the poke skill can crit, so you can actually build Heart's Claws together with it. Mincy already usually builds DHS in his attack speed build at least, and his skill 2 actually also benefits from lifesteal. That means you can lifesteal using the skill 2 poke. I guess it could work, you know, building crit on Mincy. For some reason, I think it might work. Maybe Thunderbelt, Windtalker, DHS, Heart's Claws. I think it might work. We have to try it. So yeah, I think it could be possible that Mincy can be good this patch with the Rose Gold, and he can probably use Rose Gold quite well, I think. Next, we have Tamus. So Tamus, for me, this patch, I think Tamus has the potential to be really strong, because I think before this patch he would like to be more aggressive, but in order to be more aggressive, I think he wants more attacking items that have benefits for his defense as well. Because before this, Tamus either goes Corrosion Scythe, DHS, and is very squishy, like can be bursted quite easily, or he goes defense but doesn't do much damage. So for this patch, if he goes Rose Gold along with DHS and Heart's Claws, he can probably do quite a bit of damage. And I think if Tamus can snowball quite fast, especially since Tamus already has a great early game, I think he might have potential to be really good this patch. If we can figure out his build, Tamus has the potential to be very good early XP laner that can bully and snowball very quickly out of control. So I think Tamus may be the bigger beneficiaries of this patch. Next, we have Alucard. Alucard, I think, still suffers from the same weaknesses. He's still very susceptible to CC, and he's still very squishy. Although one thing I would say that is that his skill 3 at max level gives 10% lifesteal. If you build Rose Gold with Alucard, he basically gets free 30 hybrid defense at level 12 when you max out his ultimate. So the next thing is heroes with adjustments. First thing, of course, is Argus, the biggest buff on this patch. Okay, there's a lot of changes on Argus, right? They made a big adjustment on his ultimate. They kind of want to promote the crit build, because they changed the passive to benefit more from crit. He gets double the energy if he crits. Argus really wants to build crit now instead of the Trinity. But the thing is that Argus still suffers from the same weakness as before. His laning phase isn't that fantastic against some of the meta heroes. Argus really wants to be stronger in the early game to match the meta XP laners, but I guess they have to balance that, because it's like Sicilian, right? Argus really scales them well into the late game. In the late game, I don't think anybody beats Argus 1v1. So anybody that takes him 1v1 should be losing. Also, his ultimate has I think it's now broken up into 2 parts. So the first 4 seconds you are the Fallen Angel. It's like the same as the previous ultimate, but if you take fatal damage, you will have some kind of like undying mode in the next 4 seconds again. So it's like extending your immortality basically if you take fatal damage in the first 4 seconds. If you don't take the fatal damage in the first 4 seconds, then your ultimate cooldown will be reduced by 50%. So I guess they are encouraging more frequent use of the ultimate, or maybe they are helping so that if people run from you, you don't take the fatal damage, you don't need to extend the ultimate. I guess it's a good trade-off. If the enemies run from you, your cooldown is shorter. If the enemies continue to fight you, then your ultimate will be extended. So I guess it's a good kind of balance between the two. But anyway, I think Argus could be really strong this patch. It will be a struggle in the early game still, because the sustain tanky kind of XP laners are still really strong, especially since Hylos is still one of the best XP laners right now, which is just a really hard counter to the attack speed fighters. Okay, so next we have Aulus. Aulus got a couple of adjustments this patch, but mostly on his passive. You might not really notice it because it's mostly on his passive, so it's not like wow, something changed on Aulus. But if you're a regular Aulus player, probably you will notice But overall, I think they actually gave a decent amount of buffs to Aulus, which makes him possibly pretty good, because since if he already builds crit, he could include DHS into his build, or he could use the Rose Gold build pretty well, meaning like a lifesteal build, which is actually really strong. If you have been using Aulus in the previous patches, I think Aulus has good potential already, but this patch may at least take him into decent meta area. Like, he can be considered a good hero at least, especially in the jungle. I think Aulus has the potential to be a good hero this patch. Okay, next we have Badang. Badang got a bit of a buff to his ult. They increased the stun duration of the ult from I think like 0.6 seconds to 1 second, which keeps the enemy in the ult for slightly longer. But I think that's a good buff for him, because to be honest, as a Badang user myself, I don't want the enemies to move out from my ult so fast. So that's a good buff to him. But they increased the cooldown, which to be honest, I don't think it really matters that much, because anyway, after your ult finishes, there will be gaps between your team fights anyway. I think the buff to Badang is decent. All in all, I think in rank at least, Badang has been actually good for me, because I think he can take 1v1 really well. He has the potential to push towers, and I think Badang has decent team fight because he can go backline. He has like a AoE kind of CC, so I think Badang actually is good anyway, but now he can include Rose Gold to potentially fight. Next we have Sun. The devs actually did a couple of adjustments on Sun. Now skill 2 will not stop on hit. That means if you throw skill 2 towards an enemy, it doesn't stop there. It will go past the enemy. Before the patch, if you throw it towards an enemy, it will stop on the enemy. But now it will just pass through the enemy. So this is good for escaping, because sometimes when you're trying to escape, the enemy will just body block your skill 2 and then you will be stuck there with him. Other than that, they changed his skill 3 to be more higher damage in the early game and has a slow now. But can he use the Rose Gold that well? Actually, I played one game of Sun yesterday and I tried out the crit build on him. Not that impressed by the build. I think Sun is not that fantastic in this patch, because I think he still suffers a lot from the original weaknesses he already has, which is his clones die too fast, and if you want damage, you will need the clones. He's a fantastic split pusher, but I think Argus does that better. His clones die too fast if the enemies know what to do against you. So I think Sun, the obvious weakness still stands. He still has major weaknesses, especially to AoE damage. Next we have Zilong. For Zilong, they buffed his passive, so he can sustain better in the early game, but they nerfed his ultimate so that you get less attack speed boost. So actually, Zilong is slightly better in the early game because he can sustain the lane better, but at the same time, he still suffers from the same problem. He's very squishy. His team fight is basically almost played like Assassin. So if you already have an Assassin on your team, it kind of defeats the purpose of having a Zilong. It's like two Assassins, then who's gonna go in first? Everybody's waiting for each other to do the damage. If Zilong goes in first, he dies first. If the Assassin goes in first, he also dies first. So there's a big problem in the current meta for Zilong. So I think Zilong is just okay in this patch. The buffs didn't really bring him to great levels, in my opinion. Moving on, we have the minor updates. Minor nerfs to Malefic Gun. So Malefic Gun got a nerf to the range from 15% down to 12%. Not a huge nerf, to be honest. Not huge. 3%. There's not a huge effect on what it still does, which is to improve the range. For marksmen that already have big range, right? Like Layla and Bruno. Oh, by the way, Bruno got nerfed. So Bruno, they nerfed his range slightly. Along with the Malefic Gun nerf, I think this should be enough to take Bruno from the top. Yeah, but Malefic Gun nerf is still very strong, and they nerfed its movement speed gain. Previously it was 1 second, now they nerfed it to 0.5 seconds. So you really need fast attack speed to keep up that move speed passive. Anyway, the next thing is that minor nerfs to Bruno, Fanny and Sicilian, which are top picks in current meta, of course. I think Bruno is gonna go down a level. I think he's still gonna be good, but slightly lower in the rankings because of his range nerfed. Secondly, Fanny has been in the ban list for a while, whether in competitive or rank. Fanny has been in the ban list. They nerfed her energy slightly. She will have a slightly harder time moving around, but I think that slight nerf, I think it's about a 20% nerf to her energy regen, which is like pretty impactful. The thing is that a lot of Fannies, they don't rely on staying on the battlefield and regen their energy, so it might not actually have a huge impact, even though it's like 20% change. Moving on, we have Sicilian. He has the highest pick rate in Mythic Glory Plus for the last 2 weeks. I think it deserves a nerf. The thing about Sicilian is that the early game is a bit too not too strong, but it's not level on what he can do in the late game. If you're gonna make a very strong late game hero, you need to balance it with weak early game, basically. You don't want it to be too strong in early, because if not, why does it have such a great late game? He's a hero that can scale infinitely, so they slightly nerf his damage. I think maybe you will take Sicilian down a bit. He should still be a popular hero, I think. Next, buffs to Harith, Dyrov and Lancelot. Harith got good amount of changes to his skill 2, basic attack range. I think Harith could rise up a little bit in the gold lane meta. Previously, Harith has been mostly picked because he's a good laner against most of the meta, and I think now he can be picked because of his own strength instead of just being almost like a counter pick in the lane. Next we have Dyrov. Dyrov, they are working on making Dyrov more of a late game fighter. Like, they realize that Dyrov is like early game, smack that lane. If you don't smack that lane, you lose that lane or whatever, you're gonna be useless in the late game. So they want to make Dyrov into a more sustained kind of fighter. They are changing his passive to have more healing. I don't think that will actually work, because his kit just doesn't work that way. I think Dyrov may fall a lot in the meta because they nerfed his skill 2 penetration, I think the previous patch or something. So Dyrov may fall even more. I don't know about the direction of Dyrov, but I don't think this buff is gonna do much for Dyrov. The next one is Lancelot. Lancelot got a huge buff to his skill 2 damage. It'll be good for him because Lancelot was probably the top 10 worst win rate heroes. And if you watch my streams, I always call him lose a lot. He really loses a lot because he just doesn't do enough damage, I guess. So it will take a really skillful user to pull him off. But the skill 2 damage increase might help him a bit. So we'll see how he takes Lancelot. I think the buff is pretty strong because it's almost double the damage of double the base damage of the previous version. After this, we have the minor buffs to CC, Carry and Irrital. So for CC, I think they buffed the basic attack range. Nothing crazy. Won't take CC to the next level or anything. It's just slight buff to her basic attack. Then we have Carry, which they buffed her ultimate to now do extra damage. Also nothing crazy. But it's good to 1v1 against other marksmen. For tanks, doesn't do much. This won't bring her anywhere in the meta, but it's still the same for Carry. For Irrital, they buffed her ultimate damage slightly, I think. Nothing crazy either. Yeah, I think Irrital has always been on the borders of being meta. In my opinion, actually Irrital is meta, inside the meta pool. But I think a lot of people don't view it that way. Okay, so next, my thoughts on the meta. After all these changes to the attack speed fighters, I don't think there will be a huge change because I think the attack speed fighters still have huge hurdles to climb through. They have a mountain to climb because attack speed fighters still suffer from the same problems. Let's talk about it. Bruno is the hot topic of the previous patch. Finally, I think Bruno is gonna be dethroned from being the king of gold lane. He's not gonna be the king of gold lane anymore, I think, because I think one of the things going for Bruno last patch was his range actually. After taking out his range, I don't think he's that bad after taking out his range, but he's gonna find it harder in team fights. It's better off you just go Layla if you want the range. It's better to go Mia if you want to split push. It's better to go Irrital if you want mobility. So Bruno might find himself in the middle of the meta instead of at the top. Then next, can Argus become the king of gold lane? With all the buffs, right? Can Argus actually become part of the gold lane meta? I mean, we have seen Freya in gold lane, in rank at least. I'm not talking about competitive, okay? Competitive deserves a different discussion, but we are talking about rank. Argus could be the next Freya in gold lane. Could be. But I still see obstacles for Argus to go through because his early game is not as strong as Freya. Freya's early game is much stronger. Freya and Argus the angel and the demon. Argus is the early game. Argus is the late game Freya. Freya is the early game Argus. So they are opposites of each other. But if Argus goes late game, I don't think any marksman can actually even resist Argus. Argus could become part of the gold lane meta. That's my opinion right now. And if the buffs to Argus are good enough and the crit build is that OP as I theorize it could be, I could see him becoming the king of gold lane. We shall see. Maybe I'm talking out my ass here, but it could happen. Next we have Tamus rising in XP meta. I think Tamus could become a very oppressive early game XP laner, almost not letting anybody farm. If let's say Tamus goes Windtalker, Huskclaws, Rose Gold, it's gonna be so much lifesteal, so much crit, so much defense. I think it might become too powerful in the XP meta. It's possible that he can become like the top early game XP. I mean, he already is before this patch, like one of the top early game XP. It's just that his lack of CC doesn't always keep him up there, because XP laners meta has always been utility. Next, I think because of the rising attack speed marksman, plus they are now introducing attack speed fighters, Balearic Hylos probably going to be even more popular. The attack speed counters, these two can be really high in the meta, just to counter this attack speed. So of course Lolita, of course we have to mention Lolita, but she doesn't counter the attack speed fighters. And of course we have to talk about Dormice. Because of Dormice, right, it's gonna be hindering the rise of the attack speed fighters, because Dormice really does a lot against the attack speed fighters. I mean, especially this patch, it's encouraging lifesteal and attack speed. Guess what counters it? Guess what freaking counters attack speed and lifesteal? Dormice. Plus is physical, so Dormice also gives physical defense. So this item itself counters everything that they want to give to the attack speed fighters, just this item alone. So because of Dom Ice, I don't think this meta actually will work. I think it's gonna be interesting to observe what happens in the next few weeks, but I think they need a lot more buffs to the attack speed fighters.